Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. A few months ago, I was walking home from a late shift, maybe around 10:30 at night, and I noticed a man across the street who seemed to slow down every time that I did. I stopped to check my phone, and he stopped too, pretending to tie his shoe while watching me out of the corner of his eye. I crossed the road, and he crossed right after me with no hesitation. At that point, I was fully alert, so I turned down a side street that leads to my flat, and I could hear his footsteps behind me getting closer. I spun around and then I asked, "Can I help you?" And he stared at me for a second too long before saying, "You dropped something," even though my hands were empty. When I said that I hadn't, he smiled, stepped closer, and then said my first name. I have never seen this man before in my life. I backed away, ran the rest of the way home, and I didn't stop until I was inside and locked the door. I checked from the window, and I saw him standing at the end of the street, looking straight at my building, before slowly walking away. I still take a different route home now, and I never wear headphones anymore. This story is a little weird. I live in a part of Iowa that has a lot of meth addicts, but this just feels different. I walk to work Monday to Thursday, and yes, I have a 3-day weekend, and I always go the same way. Well, I've lived here for about 2 years, but about 2 months ago, I noticed this guy sitting on the curb. I didn't think much of it, and every day at about 4 p.m. when I head to work, he's there, on the curb. I figured that he's new to town, just on his own schedule that matches my own. But last week I went to work and I walked past him, and after I turned a few corners around a few buildings over a river, I realized that I forgot my work visor. I didn't want to wear the spare one that everyone wears that's never washed, so I turned around and I started to walk back. I crossed the river, but the man was now walking towards me. I smiled, and he didn't even make eye contact. We walked past each other, and that was that. I got my visor, and I started walking back to work. But this is where I started to get worried. He was clearly following me. When I started walking back, he was again walking towards me. I crossed the street to use the other sidewalk, and god damn it, he not only gave me eye contact, he was giving me the fucking eye for using the other sidewalk. I figured I was overthinking it, but I decided to play it safe. I didn't like leaving my apartment unwatched, so I called my girlfriend to come over to stay while I'm at work. When she got there, she said that there was a guy outside my apartment smoking, and when she described him, it sounded just like him. Eventually, he left, and I returned home. The next day again, I was going to have to walk to work, and I asked that my girlfriend stayed at home. I started walking, and again, the dude was sitting there. So I confronted him. I asked him for his name. He stood up and gave out the loudest fucking guttural scream that I ever heard. I freaked out and I started running back home. I ended up calling out for work due to feeling unsafe, and a few hours later, I heard someone scratching at the window. I looked outside. I knew who it was, but I didn't want it to be true. And of course, it was the guy. And oh my God, I was bawling, yelling at my girlfriend to call the police. The police came and I gave them a description, and that was it. The freaky part comes to yesterday. I got a phone call from an unknown number. I figured that it was spam, but I just kept getting phone calls. So I answered, and I heard that loud scream come from the phone. I don't know whether it was the guy or some persistent prank caller, but I don't have a clue how the guy would have gotten my number. I reported it to the police. I'm deciding to write this out because goddamn, was he fixing to rob me? Just pranking me? Was he a drug addict, a stalker, some really mentally ill dude? Whatever it was, it creeped the hell out of me. This happened ages ago. I'm not overly concerned about it, but it was just an odd thing that happened, and that I wanted to share it. I was at a Costa with my mom after a pretty busy day. It's on the outskirts of my town, and admittedly a pretty sketchy sort of area. We were just heading there to get a drink and then head home. But my mom's car declined, so we decided just to head back. While we were stood outside our car in the parking lot, a guy in a van pulled up behind us in a parking space. My mom was texting my dad about something to see if she could get the drink sorted. The guy in the van was just staring at me and my mom, and he did so until we got inside the car. When we got into the car, he then drove off, or so we thought at least. We sat in our car for a couple of minutes before heading to leave, and when we did, I noticed that this same guy and the same van was sat by the edge of the exit to the parking lot, wheels turned, car on and everything. I didn't think much of it then, just thought that maybe he was waiting for something. But when we left the parking lot and began to drive away, he followed us. I was a bit worried about this guy knowing where we live in case he was following us, as I get overly paranoid about stuff like this. So I asked my mom if we could get something from a fast food place that was halfway across town. The entire time that we were driving to this fast food restaurant, he was just behind us. Halfway across our town, right behind us the entire time. He only ended up leaving when we pulled into the drive-thru. I have no clue what this was about, or if I'm still overthinking it, but it's been a while since it happened. It was just something odd that happened to us. Hi everyone, just call me Hannah for this story. I went on a trip because my life felt too tight where I lived. I had just turned 30 and my long-term relationship had ended a few months earlier and I was really burned out from work. I asked for time off, booked a solo vacation to a coastal city in southern Europe, and I told myself that it was about rest. I wanted some warm air, some slow mornings, that feeling of being anonymous somewhere far away. So I picked a place where I didn't know anyone and didn't speak the language well. I know that's a bit silly, but that's part of the challenge, okay? I wanted the full tourist experience, and at that time, it felt freeing. The first few days were calm. I walked everywhere. I spent hours by the water, and I ate alone without feeling awkward about it. But on my fourth night there, I stopped at a small bar near my hotel. It was nothing special. It was just a place with old wood tables, some dim lights and locals mixed with tourists, and I sat at the bar because it felt easier than taking up a table alone. And that is where I met him. He was sitting a few stools away and noticed that I was struggling to read the menu. He was around my age, maybe a bit older, with dark hair that looked carefully styled, and his clothes seemed not flashy, in a way that made him seem safe. He wasn't drunk or loud, and nothing about him felt alarming. He helped me order, and then we talked casually while having a drink. It felt like that kind of short vacation interaction that you expect, friendly but temporary, and he had never even introduced himself. When it was time to leave, he asked if I wanted to meet again while I was still in the city, but I declined. I remember being clear about it and not rude, just honest. I didn't want anything. I just wanted to relax and be a tourist for a few days before I go home. And after rejecting him, I went back to my hotel, and I didn't think much of it. People get rejected all the time, especially on vacation, and I just assumed that that was the end of it. The next day when I went out, our paths crossed again. I was walking through a busy outdoor market in the afternoon, moving slowly and stopping at different stalls. At first, I thought I was mistaken. Cities are full of familiar looking strangers. But I saw him more than once, a few steps behind me, never close enough to accuse him of anything. But when I stopped, he stopped. And when I crossed the street, he crossed too. I told myself that I was being paranoid and that it was probably a silly coincidence. Until that night when I saw him near my hotel. I had gone out for dinner and came back later than usual. As I turned onto my street, I noticed him standing near the corner, leaning against a wall and looking down at his phone. He looked up as I passed. He didn't follow me inside, but he watched me go in. That was the first moment that I felt uneasy enough to check if I have locked my door twice. Over the next few days, the sightings kept happening. He was at the cafe that I went to. He was sitting outside even when it was cooler. He was on the same bus that I took to the beach, standing a few feet away and getting off at the same stop. What made it worse was how careful he was. He never touched me. He never blocked my way. He never followed me directly into places. It was always just enough to make me doubt myself. I started to wonder if I was imagining it. Maybe the travel stress was getting to me. But then I found proof that I couldn't explain away. One afternoon, I returned to my hotel room earlier than planned because I wasn't feeling well. When I checked my phone, and I had a new follow request on social media from an account with no profile picture. Now, I know what you're thinking. It could be anyone, right? But my gut feeling was telling me that it was him. The weird thing is that I hadn't told him my full name. I also hadn't tagged my location publicly. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the hallway made me sit up in bed. But later on, maybe from exhaustion, I did end up falling asleep. The next morning, there was a small folded piece of paper slipped under my door. It had my first name written on it. Nothing else. No message, just my name. I then went and reported it to the front desk. They took me seriously enough to move me to a different room on another floor. But they told me that there was little that they could do without the clear threat. I didn't go to the police because I didn't know how to explain it in a foreign language, and I was afraid of not being taken seriously because I was just a tourist. But the worst moment came near the end of my trip. I was on the train heading to a nearby town for a day trip, thinking that it would be safer to be somewhere crowded and more distant to where he was stalking me. When the train doors closed, I saw him at the other end of the car. He hadn't noticed me yet, but the way he turned his head back and forth made it clear. He was looking for me. I got off at the next stop, which wasn't the one that I was hoping to originally, and I waited on the platform with my heart pounding. A few seconds later, he stepped off too and scanned the area until his eyes landed on me. That was the first time that I felt real fear, the kind that makes your body feel hollow. I walked straight to the station office and I stayed there until I could get a train back. He didn't approach me, but he stood far away enough to watch. I left the country 2 days early. I paid the fee to change my flight without caring about the cost. And on my last night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept the lights on and my bag packed by the door. There was nothing dramatic that happened in the end. There was no confrontation, no chase. He never tried to stop me from leaving. But that almost made it worse. It felt kind of unfinished, like he could have done more if he wanted to. And when I landed back home, I blocked the account that had followed me. I didn't post photos from that trip for months. That vacation that was supposed to make me feel free again, instead, it taught me how quickly a stranger can decide that you matter to them in the way that you never agreed to, and how powerless you can feel when someone refuses to let go. During my first year of college, I thought I was being stalked by a bizarre man. After class, I went walking around campus and approached a trail in the woods. A man was in front of me just standing there looking at his phone. I thought nothing of it at first, but then, as the man was leaving, he rolled his window down in his vehicle and stared at me with this bizarre grin. I nodded, and then he drove over to a nearby parking lot and just sat there looking at me through his rearview window. I got a weird feeling, so I decided to cross the grassy knoll to the other side of campus to see if he was truly following me. Just as I had reached the parking lot, the man entered the same lot at the exact same time and then proceeded to park in a space nearby. I immediately got a nervous feeling and I proceeded to walk to the other side of campus. And just as I reached the back side, I saw the man in the same car driving towards my direction to park in another nearby space. As I was walking away, the man got out of the car and walked in my direction. He pretended as if he was on a phone call, but I saw right through it. I kept walking, and when I turned the corner of a nearby building, I began to run. Eventually, I lost sight of him. For an hour, I was freaking out because I didn't know what to do. Eventually, he saw me again at some point because he pulled back in the parking lot where I was walking. I approached the car and I knocked on the window. I asked the man if he was following me, but his answer was bizarre. "I don't even know you, dude," he replied. I thought his answer was evasive, so I tried to ask him again. He denied it again, but never fully answered the question. I left and I never saw that man again after that. But what do you think was happening? A few years ago, my girlfriend, me, and four of our friends rented a cabin for a few days during spring break. We just wanted a place where we could all chill and do whatever. The only determined plan we did make was for all of us to go rock climbing together. The cabin was bigger than expected, too. It had 3 bedrooms, one with a master bath, and then another separate bathroom, which was great. The living room was spacious enough for all of us to watch a movie in, and the kitchen was big enough for one of my friends to cook a full-course meal. He was going to a culinary school at that time, so he was always willing to cook for someone, and we were always willing to be the guinea pigs. The kitchen had a door to the back covered porch, which then led out to an open field with a big fire pit and trees that lined the back of it. It was perfect, especially for the price. And if it wasn't obvious, there were three couples, and we all drove separate cars and met there. We all chipped in and split the cost of our food, drinks, and entertainment, and legitimately, all worked out really well. I think the worst part that we had experienced was Mike and Jess missing a turn and having to guide them backwards. Well, that was until the second night. The night had a slight chill to it, but nothing a bonfire couldn't fix. So we went to start a fire and realized that none of us brought lighter fluid. So we started looking around the cabin for a lighter or matches or anything. We finally found a lighter that barely worked in the bathroom and was able to get our fire started. We all grabbed some drinks and sat by the fire, just talking and screwing off. When I noticed Leslie staring off, I nudged my girlfriend Madison to look at her and then she called her out. That's when Leslie pointed out a figure standing by the trees. Isaiah, being the guy that's not afraid of anything, called him out, asking if he wanted to join us, or if he at least had a lighter. After we all sat there snickering, we watched as he slowly turned and walked towards the driveway and then down the hill, until we couldn't see him anymore. This place was like a campground but with cabins, so we weren't really in the middle of nowhere. So at first, we just assumed that it was someone at a neighboring cabin watching us, possibly mad about us being outside, possibly being loud, you know? That was actually a tame night, but some people are pretty whiny like that. So we decided to just take it back inside since the fire was weak anyways. And the rest of the night was just us playing a game inside, and it went just fine. The next day was our rock climbing and hiking day. We all piled into Jess's Jeep, and then we headed to the place. And the event went great. We were all having a lot of fun. We ended up coming across a lake at the bottom of a small cliff, and being the dumb young people we were, we all made bets and dared Isaiah to jump into the lake from the top of the overhang. And like I said, it wasn't that high up, and swimming was permitted in that lake, so it wasn't that big of a deal. It was more so just his girlfriend that didn't want him to do it, but as dumb guys do, he did it anyway. And once we all got in, I just enjoyed floating on the water and people watching. When I noticed someone who stood out. It was a guy standing over by the cliffside that Isaiah jumped from. But the reason he stood out was because of his choice of clothing. While everyone else around us was in hiking garb, some bathing suits or even just shorts and a t-shirt, this guy was in black dress pants, a black suit jacket, and a black hat like a fedora style. He had the hat on pretty low, however, so I couldn't see his face. Yet, I felt his gaze. He was definitely staring in our direction, and this time I said out loud to everyone, "Are we being stared at?" This caused everyone to look in the same direction and notice this guy too. We were all just there having a staring contest and talking amongst ourselves as to why someone would possibly be here dressed like that. And not long after, Isaiah again shouted out to the guy, which caused some of the other people nearby to look around. I assume others noticed the oddity as they began staring, talking, and pointing, which then caused the guy to turn around and walk straight back behind the ledge. Until he was gone. We all thought this was weird, but I, at least, didn't connect it to our previous night's experience at this point. I just thought that it was someone being weird. We ended up leaving shortly after to get stuff for dinner, as well as some lighter fluid. just to be prepared for our next fire. After dinner and freshening up, we tried to have a bonfire again. This time, it went a lot better, and we had loosened up and were having a blast. We were talking and teasing. The girls were even pushing their limits and making a fool of themselves. It was genuinely a great time for us. Well, that was until Leslie was again caught staring into the trees. That's when we all turned to look and saw the same guy. This form was the same, with a giant flashlight Mike bought this time. We could shine the light right on him. He was wearing the same pants and suit, jacket, and hat. And when the light hit him, he didn't really budge though. He leaned his head down some, probably to block out some of the light, but otherwise, he didn't do anything else. Isaiah again yelled at the sky, but it was a bit more threatening. I don't really blame him though. The girls were getting pretty nervous, and this guy had obviously been following or watching us. But this time, after a lot of shouting, I think most of us started feeling uncomfortable with the situation, and we all agreed to go inside. Once in, Madison actually called the cabin management office and told them that someone was being creepy around our cabin and said that they would send someone out to take a look. The rest of the night wasn't as eventful, as the staring guy kind of made us sober up some, but we did watch another movie until some of us started getting drowsy. Leslie and Isaiah went to their room. Madison went to bed before the second movie ended, and I followed her after it was over, leaving Mike and Jess in the living room. Mike was already snoring, so I assumed they weren't going anywhere. I don't know the exact time, but I know that it wasn't more than an hour or so after I went to bed that I woke up to a piercing scream. Madison had been startled awake too, and after confirming that it wasn't her, I ran out of the room to find out what the hell had happened. I found Jess screaming in the living room. The front door was wide open, and Mike was gone. She then explained that she woke up to a scratching sound, and when she looked at the window behind the couch they were on, she saw someone trying to open it or at least standing at it. She then said that Mike ran out of the door to catch the guy. Isaiah and I ran out after him, but found him shouting towards the trees. When we caught up to him, he said that he had caught up to the guy, knocked his hat off, but the guy fought back with pepper spray or something to that sort. He said something hit his face, which made his eyes burn, and it was hard to breathe. We brought him back to the cabin, and this time, we called the cops and the office people. This time, Madison was not as nice. Police actually showed up pretty quickly, and then took our report. And then they looked around the cabins. They even went to a couple nearby and questioned those people too. They, of course, never found the guy or his hat. This guy most likely was brazen enough to go back and get it, and still miss the cops. Jess took Mike to the hospital, and Madison agreed to go with her, while the rest of us stayed behind. We never saw the guy again that night, but none of us went back to sleep either. After a few hours, the others came back and confirmed that it was just some sort of pepper spray, so he was going to be all right, but the trip had already been ruined. Jess, Leslie, and Mike were definitely not interested in staying the rest of the trip. No one could blame them either. And after some talking, we ended up packing up all of our stuff that night, and the other four took off. Madison and I were pretty shaken up too, but we still had this book for one more night, and she really wanted to give the front desk people a piece of her mind. I guess they didn't seem too concerned about the situation when she first called. And yeah, they probably should have been, because it was their property, and that could have been damaged. So, we put all of our belongings in the bedroom, locked the door, and tried our best to sleep there. The next morning was exhausting. as we didn't really sleep much. Management called us and apologized and said that they could give a partial refund, but they did offer to move us to a different cabin. After informing our friends, they told us to enjoy, but that they didn't want to go back. They did move us to one that had an indoor hot tub, so that was pretty cool. We didn't have another run in with the guy, but they also never found him. We still to this day have no idea why he targeted us or what his intentions even were if he were to break in. And the fact that he had pepper spray made me think that he had bad intentions of using it, or at least needing it. We haven't been on a trip with the others since, but we all still hang out and remember that creepy spring break that got ruined for us. So, I'm pretty new to Reddit, and this is my first time posting, so bear with me. For a little bit of background, I'm in a wonderful relationship now with a guy that I met on Tinder. So, this is no way, shape, or form me shitting on the app, even though the app can sometimes feel like a cesspool. I'm currently a senior at a 4-year university, but this happened in my sophomore year when I was 19. For me, it was pretty hard to find someone to just casually date and get to know, since I'm a bit of an introverted individual, and I wasn't looking for any old hump and dump. I also went through my fair share of abusive relationships, so dating for me was really difficult when it came to opening up and trusting people. When I matched with Chris, not his real name, I was pleasantly surprised. He was a funny, smart, interesting college student with a decent job and good intentions. I really enjoyed talking to him, but there was always a lot of anxiety when I spoke with him. I now know that I should have trusted my gut instinct, but at that time, I assumed that I was doing my introverted trust issues bullshit, and I tried to push that feeling away. We would talk a few times a week, and every time that we did, the feeling would persist. Only each time we talked, it would be stronger. He started to make comments about how he wanted me to be his girlfriend and how he was so excited for me to meet his parents. But we hadn't met and had only talked on and off for weeks at this point. So slowly, I stopped responding to some of his messages. But then I started to leave them completely unanswered. One day, I confided in my friends and I told them about the bad feeling that I always had while talking with Chris. They told me that I wasn't being open to new experiences because I hadn't let go of my past and that I wasn't being fair to him. So reluctantly, after a few weeks of radio silence and feeling guilty, I messaged him again. After another week or two of messaging and catching up, he asked me to go out to dinner with him. I was hesitant to say yes as my anxiety was through the roof, but my friends insisted that it was just nerves and it would be good for me to go out with someone. I agreed, and he excitedly told me that he had plans to take me to a nice Japanese restaurant in the city that is next to my campus. My friends were ecstatic, and they asked to see a picture of him. I pulled up his Tinder profile, and when they swiped through the pictures, they were silent. You know, he kind of looks like. They were silent, and then they said that he looks like one of my exes that was particularly abusive. I went into a full-blown panic attack. Once that I saw the resemblance, there was no going back. There was no way that I was going anywhere with this guy. I texted him back that night before the date and explained that I no longer felt comfortable going out and that I was sorry, and he never texted me back. That same week, I started getting multiple phone calls every day from an unknown number. They would leave me voicemails that would say things like,
Call me back, babe.
or,
Baby, where are you? Why won't you give me a chance?
I tried ignoring them, but one day after getting almost 10 calls, I answered, ready to curse someone the fuck out. I called Chris by his name and I told him to fuck off, and I was met with laughter.
This isn't Chris, this is Jeff.
Who the fuck?
Chris said I could have you.
He started laughing, so I hung up, and he immediately called back. I sent him to voicemail.
He said you wanted to go out with me instead. He told me what university you go to, and show me a few of your pictures. I'll wait on campus if I have to.
I blocked his number, and for a few more days, I got a few more unknown calls and voicemails detailing some pretty weird, aggressive, and gross shit. But they eventually died down. I don't know if this guy was serious, or maybe it was Chris getting his friend to fuck with me as revenge for canceling. But whatever it was, it had me looking behind anytime that I walked anywhere on campus for the rest of the semester. My roommates and I had a male friend stay with us for a while just in case, and I started going back to my hometown on the weekends because I was afraid to stay on campus for too long. It's been 2 years, so I hope that in this amount of time, Chris and Jeff have learned to become better people, or that someone kicked their asses already. Hi everyone. I'm a 34-year-old female, and I'm not looking for advice. I just want to share my story. Many years back, I dated a man-child relatively the same age as myself. We got along quite well. He was a gentleman, hospitable, kind, and loving. But in hindsight, things escalated quite quickly. We went from being friends to being exclusive within a month. Not enough time to truly know someone. The story is quite lengthy, and I'll do my best to shorten it without leaving out integral details. We saw each other daily. We mostly hung out at his home, and that was fine with me in the beginning, as I'm rather introverted. But a couple of months into our relationship, I started to question on why we weren't leaving the house, why we weren't going out and experiencing new things and trying out new hobbies. His responses were always cloudy. He always tried to redirect the conversation, thinking that I was truly stupid and I couldn't tell that this was an obvious avoidance tactic. That was the point where I started to become curious, and from there, it went downhill. I'm not an intrusive person, but considering that he was my partner, I had a right to inquire as to why we were isolating ourselves. After some mild questioning for a few weeks, I noticed that he began to create distance. This noticeable change was hard to ignore and pretty much confirmed my suspicions. However, I'm not going to make a decision based on assumptions. I'm ashamed to admit this, but one night while he was sleeping, I went through his phone. I still feel disgusting, even though I found 100% proof that I was the side chick. I could not believe it. I still can't. I was with this person daily. It obviously confirmed why we were so confined to his home, but it was perplexing because she had no idea about me. It was about 2 a.m. when I looked through his phone. There was no way that I could sleep beside him for the remainder of the morning, so I quietly got out of bed, collected my things, and then went home. The next day, I believe he realized what had happened. However, he never contacted me to see why I left. Things remained silent for the entire day. But then I received a phone call later that evening. I confronted him, and again, I'm ashamed to say that I did take photos of the evidence, as I knew that he would try to gaslight me. The fury in his voice was palpable. He did what a usual abuser would do and blame me for going through his phone while totally ignoring his infidelity. It was utterly pathetic. He had created this delusion that I was going to contact the other girlfriend and then tell her all his wrongdoings, all his infidelity, lying, cheating, and many more. I would have done this. However, while I was looking through the phone, I realized that this girl was very sheltered. She was completely oblivious of what was going on. I was afraid that he would retaliate against myself and her, and I thought to myself that eventually she would just find out. I do regret not informing her. However, my decision was my decision, and I cannot change that. Well, this is where my nightmare begins. He was so paranoid and confident that I was going to contact his girlfriend that he would constantly call me daily and make vague threats against me. I persistently advised him that I would not contact her, that it was none of my business, and that she would eventually find out that he was a deceitful, inept brainworm sooner or later. All I wanted was for him to fuck off, leave me alone, and never speak with me again. That was my only request. But he obviously didn't take my kind words well, and he continued to harass me. Only a few days later, things completely erupted. His paranoia exceeded levels I have never seen before, and he sent me a threatening message with the context being that I have compromising photos and that he will release them, as he believed that I would ruin his relationship. I could not believe the delusion, no matter what I said, no matter how I phrased it. I even had my mom speak with him at one point, but it was useless. I sent him a message stating that if this was true, and if he messaged me again, I'm going to call the cops. 5 minutes later, I received 11 messages in succession. A few were videos, photos, and personalized animations of myself. I had never seen these images and videos and animations before, and these were taken without my consent. These were extremely intimate and compromising. Unbeknownst to me, he had cameras set up around his room. These weren't just threats. These were screenshots of these images, videos, and animations uploaded on various sharing sites. Luckily, he lacked intelligence. He sent me the evidence. There was nothing that I could do to stop the uploads, so I immediately went to the police. They did manage to take some down. However, there were no promises, as once a photo is uploaded, it could be immediately archived. This has forever altered my life. I don't see relationships the same, and I can't be intimate. I can't form strong bonds. I've become apathetic, and I am forensically observant. I have difficulty trusting everyone, even my family, and so much more. In conclusion, the police were rather efficient and treated me well. I was granted an immediate protection order, family violence order. He broke that quite quickly and called my phone trying his best to apologize, begging to drop the charges. He was so pathetic that he got his mummy to ring me and tried to persuade me. I immediately called the police and they took immediate action. They ended up going to court and I won. It's not the result that I wanted. However, he did get his name on that good old sex offenders registry, which is far more egregious than people may think. Nevertheless, this is beyond life-changing. To all who have gone through this, I'm sorry, and I feel your pain. Cheers for listening to my story. I know it was long, but I hope it was a good read. Be careful around the people you think you trust. I know that's quite nihilistic and pessimistic. These are some of the unfortunate aspects of life. It's quite paradoxical. Humans are social creatures, but many humans are pure rat shit. I have never been one for dances, but when sophomore year rolled around, I found myself swept up in the excitement for our high school's dance. For those who don't know, it's the dance where girls ask the guys, shaking up the usual tradition. I was a shy, awkward 14-year-old with a love for anime and manga, and I wanted to make a bold move for once. There was this guy, Roger, in our school who seemed to share my interest. We hardly spoke, but I knew him through some mutual friends. He was quiet, almost invisible in the bustling halls of our school, which somehow made him seem safe. With a burst of courage, I asked him to the dance. In my naivety, I thought that it would be nothing more than a fun night out with friends. Roger agreed. There was a shy smile spreading across his face. We decided to meet at the dance, each of us joining with our respective groups of friends. I was nervous, but I was excited about what felt like a small adventure into the unknown. A few hours after asking him, I got this long, heartfelt message on Facebook. Roger confessed that he had always had a crush on me, describing my beauty in overly poetic terms that made me kinda cringe. He ended up by asking if I'd be his girlfriend. I didn't know how to handle it, especially since I barely knew him, but the pressure of my own awkwardness made me say yes. Well, that was the first misstep into what would become a distressing chapter of my life. That night, Roger called me. It was our first real conversation. I learned more about him than I bargained for. He was incredibly emotional, crying over minor grievances and claiming everyone was against him. He shared personal details that left me feeling uneasy, including his foot fetish, which was unsettling for my 14-year-old self. When I hesitated or when I went silent, he would burst into tears, claiming that I saw him as a freak. I was trying to be kind, so I reassured him, though my discomfort was growing. On the night of the dance, things took another awkward turn. Roger mentioned never having had his first kiss, lamenting how sad that was. I'd already had mine, so I reluctantly kissed him, hoping that it would settle things. Instead, he tried to kiss me repeatedly, forcing a teacher to intervene when he got too pushy in the dimly lit gym. It was mortifying. And after the dance, Roger sent me a message about how magical it was, and how our kiss was delicious, and how the teacher couldn't understand our love. I felt queasy reading it, and the thought of ending things crossed my mind, but I didn't want to deal with more tears. A couple of days later, Roger asked me to a movie, suggesting we double date with his friends. He was persistent, even when I explained that my friend wasn't interested in his. His friend called me names for refusing, and Roger's tears flowed once again. I begrudgingly agreed to the movie, and during the show, his friend sat behind us, making the whole experience awkward. Roger kept trying to kiss me until I pushed him away. And after the movie, Roger texted demanding a photo of my feet, claiming he was depressed and it would cheer him up. When I refused, he threatened to harm himself, blaming me. Horrified, I sent the photo. This manipulation spiraled over the next 2 weeks, him accusing me of cheating whenever I was busy, and me reluctantly sending photos to calm him down. Eventually, I reached my breaking point. I ended the relationship. I was just so tired of the emotional manipulation. Roger cried, begged to remain friends, and promised that he would change. And with the school year ending and Roger transferring, I thought the nightmare was over. But Roger's messages continued, each one filled with threats of self harm if I didn't reply. I tried ignoring him, hoping that he would stop, but nothing changed until I threatened to report him to the police. The messages stopped for a while, finally giving me room to breathe. Years passed, and I moved away for college, thinking that I'd left Roger behind. I was building a new life, feeling free and happy with a new boyfriend, until I got a notification that Roger followed me on Instagram. My heart sank. I blocked him immediately, but within minutes, a message arrived from an unfamiliar account asking why I blocked him. I was livid. I sent a final message, warning him that I would get a restraining order if he didn't leave me alone. Roger's response was bitter and filled with insults, but I never heard from him again after that. And finally, I felt a sense of relief that the past no longer was hanging over me. A few months later, I received a message from a girl who dated Roger after me. She shared a similar story, confirming that his pattern of manipulation wasn't just a one-time ordeal. She said that she found me because even though while they were dating, Roger wouldn't stop talking about me, so she got curious and reached out. We bonded over our shared experiences, finding comfort in knowing that we weren't alone. To anyone reading this, please trust your instincts and stand firm in your boundaries. And as for Roger, let's not meet again. So, I'm a 23-year-old female based in London. Sadly, this is not my first or second creepy encounter like this. I was getting in the lift on the tube and immediately noticed this guy aggressively staring at me. For some reason, he just creeped me out. He was a lot taller than me. I'm 5'5" and has some toolbox in his hand. I had a mental note in the back of my head to just keep an eye out for him. And so I get to the platform. Keep in mind, he's constantly looking over my way, and I saw him walk into the train station, so I make it a point to walk to the other side of the platform to an empty carriage. But tell me how literally a minute after that, this man comes to my completely empty carriage and then sits right next to me, not even a seat in between. At this point, I am spooked and I told myself that I'd get to my station and wait a few seconds before getting up to see if he's going to get up or not, so I know if he is planning on following me off the tube. The train stops, and I wait a few seconds before getting up. He's still reading his newspaper, so I quickly get out before the doors closed. The entire time I'm looking back, making sure that he's not there. I got to the top of the escalator, and I even waited a minute looking down, and I still didn't see him, and I thought that that was the end. I'm waiting outside for a phone call from my friend, and suddenly I look up to see this man walking out of the station. What the fuck? He's staring at me, and then he comes out, and my heart is racing. I ended up walking behind him on the way to my friend, and when he turned around and noticed, he suddenly dropped something, so he ends up being behind me. Luckily, my friend called me and I very loudly said that I'm on the way and I'll be there in a minute. Immediately, he crossed the road and then fucked off into the distance. Absolutely shambolic, and it still gives me the chills. It started on a Thursday night in late October. I had ordered takeout through one of those food delivery apps. Something simple, a burger and fries, from a diner a few blocks away. It was around 9:30 p.m., and I remember being half asleep on the couch when the doorbell rang. The driver was a tall guy, maybe mid-30s, wearing a jacket with the restaurant's logo. He smiled, handed me the bag, and that was that. I didn't think much of it. But the next night, around the same time, my doorbell rang again. I hadn't ordered anything, but when I looked through the peephole, it was the same delivery guy holding another paper bag from the same diner. He looked tired, like he had been driving all day. I opened the door just enough to tell him that there must have been a mistake. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded, checked his phone, and said something like, okay, and then walked off, and I assumed that it was a mix-up. The following night, it happened again. Same guy, same diner, same time. At that point, it wasn't just weird, it was creepy. I checked my delivery app history to make sure that no one had hacked my account, but there were no new orders. I even changed my password and I turned off my safe payment info. Still, the next evening, right around 9:30, I saw his car headlight sweep across my living room window. That time, I didn't answer anymore. I watched from the peephole as he stood there holding the bag, and after a minute or two, he placed it on the doormat and left. I waited until he drove away before opening the door, and inside the bag was another burger and fries, still warm. The receipt taped to the top had my exact name and address, but the phone number listed wasn't mine. I tried calling it, but it went straight to a disconnected tone. I didn't sleep much that night. Over the next week, it kept happening. Every night, always around 9:30, always the same driver. He didn't knock anymore. He just left the food quietly on the doorstep and then drove off. Sometimes, I'd find the bag there when I get home from work. At first, I tried to get help through the app. I reported the issue several times. I even called the diner directly. They said no one by that name worked there, and they didn't have any record of the supposed orders. I double-checked the bags. There were no restaurant labels, and it was just a plain brown paper. And by the second week, I started noticing small things. Once, I found a note inside the bag, just a folded napkin with a short message written in a shaky handwriting. It said, "I hope you like it." Another time, the burger had no wrapper, just sitting inside the bag, and it looked handmade, not something from the diner. And just to note, I was not eating these food. I was too paranoid that maybe it was laced with something. I stopped opening the door after dark. I even considered moving. But I lived alone and I didn't have the money to break my lease. Luckily, I had 2 months left on my current one, and I just planned to wait it out. I also tried parking my car down the street, keeping my lights off and pretending that I wasn't home. But that didn't stop him, though. Sometimes, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and notice my motion sensor light outside flicker on. And when I checked the camera feed on my doorbell, I'd see a tall figure standing at the edge of my porch, just out of focus. One night, I decided to stay up and watch from the window. I kept the lights off and I waited. At around 9:35, I saw a car pull up slowly in front of the house. Same old sedan, and he didn't even get out this time. He just sat there with the headlights off for a few minutes. and then he drove away. That was the last time he came. I moved apartments about 2 months later, mostly because I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. And for a while, I thought it was over. But last week, when I opened my new mailbox, there was a brown paper bag inside. The receipt on top had my new address printed perfectly, and underneath it, written in the same shaky handwriting as before, were 3 words that said, "Found you again." What do I do? I've already moved to a new place, and I definitely do not have the money to break my lease. If I report this to the police, do you think they would take me seriously? Any advice about this matter would be appreciated. So this all happened yesterday at around 8 a.m. I was going to pick up my friend to go to school. We're both 17, and we saw a car behind me in a turn lane that's normally empty. Now, that wasn't weird in and of itself. Sometimes there are cars turning where I turn, just not usually, so I didn't think much of it. But I had a weird feeling, so I kept an eye on the car from my rearview mirror. We both turned, and then he kept right behind me as we were going down the street. Again, that isn't exactly strange because it was a one-way street with only one possible turn right at the beginning. But I decided that if he follows me onto the next street, then he's probably tailing me. Well, guess what he did? Turned onto the next street just like I did. He parked right outside my friend's neighbor's house as I was taking the circle drive, and he looked at me as I was going to pull into my friend's driveway. He beckoned me over, looking me dead in the eyes. I didn't go over, thank the Lord, but my heart was hammering. I texted my friend ASAP and I told her to come out so that we could get into the car. While I was waiting for her, I kept an eye on the dude. He got out of the car, opened his trunk, grabbed something from it, I couldn't see it from my car, and then went up to the neighbor's door 3 times. Never knocked, never said anything as far as I can tell, but definitely went up more than once. Finally, he got back into the car, he circled around once, and then left, and I haven't seen him since. But it's been bugging me. It's the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me, even as a 17-year-old girl. And I genuinely think that I dodged something terrible, even though there wasn't any evidence that would lead me to believe that he was actually going to kidnap me or something. So to the ladies, trust your instincts. But yeah, crazy stuff. I can't stop thinking about it. Should I tell someone or should I just keep it to myself? I, a 30-year-old female, had one of the most terrifying stalking experiences 12 years ago. I was 18 years old, and The Great Gatsby movie with Leonardo DiCaprio had been released. Being really young, inexperienced, and very naive about how to remain safe with unwanted attention, I made every mistake in the book with a guy 23 years old at that time that started stalking me. I just graduated high school and I took a job at a health food store in my downtown area. It was my first customer service job. The owner was a big hippie, easy to work with, and flexible with the hours. At first, I worked different shifts, eventually taking the afternoon to closing hours. And due to how small the store was, I was alone without other coworkers. Only our owner sporadically dropping by to grab items off the shelf for her personal use, and then would leave after 30 or so minutes. As a side note, our store was situated next to the building that had subsidized housing for those recently released from incarceration or low income. The evening or nighttime hours were risky for young women to be out without a male escort. Every restaurant in downtown had staff that escorted girls to their cars, as it was common to be followed with assaults happening after dark. I was on edge during close, but I felt some reassurance as I had parking immediately outside of our back exit, a few feet from the door. But I was in the store closing out the register, cleaning and locking up every night alone. The front of the store was where the cash register was set up, but your back was to a large window that was right next to the sidewalk. The register faced the inside of the store, and it wasn't uncommon for me to feel people watching me and catch creepy guys looking at me through the window right behind where I was standing. Again, young and inexperienced, I didn't voice my fears or report the randos that would be a foot away watching me, only separated by that glass window. I picked up a shift during the summer's farmers market in the morning. It was a great day, actually. I was so happy to work in the morning and have a higher flow of customers. One guy, I'll call Cam, came into the store with a brochure for a local event at a spiritual center in the downtown area. I was cordial, smiling, and I got permission for us to post it at our register. He was obviously high, nothing crazy, and he looked chill. You could tell that he was in his own reality. I only talked to him for 5 minutes, and I didn't think much of the encounter and then moved on with my day. The next shift, and Cam comes into the store again. He strikes up conversation and was trying to keep my attention. Again, working in the afternoon when we maybe had 2 or 3 people come in before close, he just hung out right at the register. I was trying to give him hints that I needed to focus on work, but he would just follow me around the store while commenting on how gorgeous my legs were and that he thought that I had been an angel the last time that he saw me. He kept telling me that he had a spiritual awakening because I had shown him interest with how nice I was, insisting that I was flirting and that the sun behind my head made my hair glow like a halo. Again, young and not experienced with guys, I was equally creeped out, but also a little flattered because I had never had that kind of attention before. I thanked him for the compliments, didn't call out that they were inappropriate, just made the same excuse that I needed to focus and then walked away. And per usual, he just shadowed me everywhere that I went, watching me, but not really talking anymore. I was getting really freaked out. I let him know that he was loitering and that he needed to leave unless he was there to shop. And given how pricey the items were, I figured that it would deter him. He ended up using his food stamps to buy 1 soda or a piece of candy every hour. Maybe $3 spent every hour. And he would make the excuse that he was a customer. So I went to the bathroom to at least get some privacy. My boss had seen him hanging out in the store before, but never commented on it. I called her and I told her that I was getting scared by this guy. I let her know that he was making an excuse to stay by buying 1 cheap item and insisting that he was a customer through the whole of my shift. I really thought that she would give me support and come to the store. She was a self-proclaimed feminist that espoused consent and boundaries. So I got major whiplashed when she defended his presence. She told me that the store was in the red and on the brink of needing to close. Because he was spending any money, I shouldn't try to push him out of the store. I tried arguing that he wasn't generating significant income. She just doubled down that money was money, and then insisted that I was overthinking it, and Cam was just a kind soul that had found a similar soul bond with me that created positive energy in the store. Just, what the fuck? So, roadblock over there. All I could do was carry on. The idea of quitting didn't even cross my mind. Being my first job, I was worried that it would look bad if I left after only a couple of months. It was really hard to find local positions that were flexible with school hours, and I would be starting my first semester at the local college soon. Things slowly escalated. Cam started bringing me flowers every day. He would leave long notes confessing his love and insisting that we were soulmates. And then, he would randomly play the Great Gatsby soundtrack. He would go on and on telling me that he was Gatsby and I was his Daisy, that we were destined to be together, and that my denial of our bond was just like Gatsby's attempts to get Daisy. We were living out the movie, but our ending would be the coming together of souls wrapped in passion. He had this crazy look in his eyes every time that he brought it up, and then he started just calling me Daisy. Anytime another customer would come in, he would get angry and jealous that I quickly ignored him and walked away. He started calling himself my bodyguard and told me that it was his duty to beat anyone up that looked at me wrong or made a pass at me that would be a threat to our love. Again, I want to emphasize that I was so stupid for not quitting this job or telling anyone about this. It's an understatement that I was a complete dumbfuck for not making police reports, documenting things, creating boundaries, leaving my job, or telling friends, parents, and coworkers. For a few weeks, he didn't show up. I thought that there would finally be a break or that he lost interest. And then he showed back up, told me that he was hospitalized. Great. Same routine started all over again. And then one day, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Cam. Not only did he get my number from a coworker, who he lied to saying that he had a new phone and lost my number, but he did a reverse search and then found my address. He didn't have transportation, and I was on the other side of town. We didn't have a bus system, and it was way too far to walk. And as far as I know, he never came to my house. But I'm sure he did, and I just wasn't aware. I didn't block his number. Again, I was so dumb. But honestly, I was scared too, because he knew where I lived, and he was so entrenched in this idea that we were bound to each other. I thought things would escalate more. I either ignored his texts or made dumb excuses for not responding, would be curt, and he wouldn't take the hint. When I started my semester at school, it got worse again. He formed a group of friends and told me that he'd introduce them. First, he wanted me to go to his apartment. When I insisted that I wouldn't, he brought them to the store. I stupidly thought that they were nice people, but they sided with him saying that he was really a nice guy and I should give him a chance. Told me that he was just melodramatic and liked playing out fantasies, but he wasn't a bad guy. A few days later, Cam told me that he was worried about my safety with the darker evenings. He said that he would have his friends posted outside the front and back of the store to make sure that I was safe. And they did. And it was freaky as fuck. Growing up in a household of abuse, I again didn't register the danger of this situation. I was accustomed to bad things happening to me, and I was still stuck in a compliant/submissive response mode. And this behavioral pattern didn't make me fight the setup. They started bringing more deliveries of gifts to me from Cam, and the 5 of them now loitered in the store with Cam during my shifts, each one of them buying one thing each hour to remain customers. It was getting too scary. 6 guys in the store, me alone, young female. Exits were being blocked by them as they insisted that they were my bodyguards who would watch the doors. My nightly habit became kicking them out, locking the store, and finishing my work in the dark so they couldn't see me inside. And then stay in the building for 2 hours so that they would go away. It did work for a week. But then one night, I stepped out of the door, and all of them were either leaned against the wall by the exit door or leaning on my car smoking and drinking. Cam came and tried to hug me with his buddies whooping in the background. He stank of alcohol and weed. I honestly thought that they were going to grab me and force me to the apartment. I made my car alarm go off and it scared them enough that I was able to jump in, lock the doors, and floor it out of the parking lot. I didn't give notice, and I just told the owner that I was done. And I still didn't tell anyone about what had happened. Cam kept trying to text me, told me that I was denying our destiny and wasn't going to give up on us. I stopped responding, and then I blocked his number, and then he would get new numbers and texts again. His texts got more threatening as I ignored him. I started hearing cars drive by at odd hours of the night, and he would text to let me know that he was still my dedicated protector, and he was just making sure that I was safe. It was obvious that one of his buddies was giving him rides to snoop at my house. But then all of a sudden, it all stopped. Radio silence, and I was so relieved. 6 months went by with nothing. But then I got a random phone call from another unknown number. I was in group chats with other students for projects, and I thought that it was one of them calling me. But it was Cam. He told me that he violated his parole and was in jail for the last 6 months, and that he had thought of me every single day, that I was his daisy, and he was going to come for me, that we would finally be together, and he'd prove to me we had an undeniable love, that I'd love his dick, that he could already feel me riding him and loving it, and he'd thought about it every day in jail. I was just pale as a ghost and speechless. All I could think was to fake a story about going abroad for studies in 2 weeks. He started screaming at me for running away from our connection. He'd find me and come after me no matter where I went, and I just hung up the phone. I trashed it, and I got a new phone with a new number. I deleted my Facebook and finally moved to a large city an hour away. I had to upend my entire life because of this piece of trash, and I was so inexperienced and naive. I made so many mistakes. But I was just glad that worst case scenarios never played out, and it was a steep learning curve that taught me how to protect myself in the future. That wasn't the last of my weird encounters. One guy at college who transferred to the larger university from our local college got a similar fixation on following me on the larger campus. Had a fetish for being stalked. He would find me at the school union and talk about how hot it would be if he found me going through his trash in the middle of the night. And thankfully, it was a huge campus, and I got friends enlisted to watch out for him and let me know where to avoid. But fuck's sake, there are so many creeps out there, and it really sucks being a woman. Hey everyone, this is your creepy sister. Thank you so much for watching the video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to leave a like and a comment. It really helps the channel out. A big shout out to both my channel members and Patreon members. Thank you so much for taking your support to the next level. You guys are great. And again, to everyone, stay scared, because your fear feeds me.